The cold wasn't just in the air anymore. It was inside her veins. Isabella couldn't feel her toes, and her breath was forming frost on the inside of the windshield. The blizzard outside had turned the world into a wall of white violence. Burying her luxury sedan in a snowbank miles from civilization, she closed her heavy eyelids, the silence of the mountain wrapping around her like a shroud. This was it. This was how it ended. But then, a sound cut through the howling wind. A heavy thud, then another. A shadow eclipsed the whiteout. A horse! And on its back, a man who looked like he was carved from the granite of the mountain itself. The GPS had lost its signal 40 minutes ago, but Isabella had kept driving. That was what Isabella did. She pushed through. She forced things to work. It was the same trait that had made her the youngest vice president of marketing in her firm's history in Chicago, and it was the same trait that was currently leading her to her death. The rental car, a sleek sedan designed for heated underground garages and paved city streets, was trembling. The steering wheel vibrated in her grip, her knuckles white, her manicured nails digging into the leather. Outside, Montana was screaming. When she had left the airport in Bozeman, the sky had been a bruised purple, heavy and low. The rental agent had warned her. He had looked at her, suede boots in her thin wool coat, and shaken his head, muttering about a front coming in over the Bridger Mountains. But Isabella had a schedule. She had a retreat to get to a lodge that promised silence and Wi-Fi, a place where she could finish the merger proposal that was due on Monday. She didn't have time for weather. Now, the weather had made time irrelevant. The snow wasn't falling. It was being driven horizontally, like millions of tiny white needles. The road, if you could even call it that anymore, had vanished. There was no asphalt, no gravel, no edge. There was only the white hood of the car and the swirling vortex beyond. Isabella tapped the brakes, a reflex from city driving, and it was the wrong choice. The car didn't stop. It floated. The rear end swung out in a lazy, terrifying arc. The world tilted. For a second, there was no sound, just the suspension floating in zero gravity. Then came the crunch. Metal tearing against rock. The hiss of steam. The car slammed downward, sliding sideways into the deep ditch, tilting at a sharp 45-degree angle. The engine sputtered, coughed once, and died. Silence rushed back in, louder than the noise. "No," Isabella whispered. Her voice sounded small, pathetic in the small cabin. "No, no, no." She turned the key. The dashboard flickered a dying Christmas tree of warning lights and went dark. She reached for her phone. No service, just a searching bar that drained her battery with every pulse. She looked out the window. The snow was piling up fast, halfway up the door already. It was suffocating. The heat from the vents was fading, replaced instantly by a biting, aggressive chill that seeped through the floorboards. She checked the time on her watch, 4:30 p.m. Sunset was minutes away, and after that, the temperature would drop to numbers that killed people. She sat there for an hour. The cold moved from uncomfortable to painful. It started in her toes, a sharp stinging sensation that slowly turned into a dull numbness. She wrapped her coat tighter, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to conserve the fading heat of her own body. She thought about the merger. She thought about her apartment overlooking the loop. She thought about the coffee she had left on her desk. It all seemed like a hallucination now. The only reality was the white darkness outside and the frost beginning to form on the inside of the glass. Her eyelids grew heavy. They warned you about this in the movies. The desire to sleep. It felt warm, inviting, a soft blanket of unconsciousness. "Just close your eyes for a minute," a voice in her head whispered. "Just rest." Isabella let her head tip back against the headrest. The wind outside howled, a mournful, angry sound. She drifted. The fear was gone, replaced by a strange, floating acceptance. The thud was rhythmic, deep, vibrating through the ground and into the chassis of the car. Isabella frowned, her eyes still closed. Was it her heart? No, it was too slow, too heavy. Thump, thump, Snort. She forced her eyes open. The windshield was covered in snow, but the side window, angled toward the sky, was clear. A shadow fell over her. Something struck the glass a gloved hand. Isabella screamed, but it came out as a croak. The door handle wrenched. It didn't move, frozen shut. Then the face appeared. It was obscured by a cowboy hat pulled low and a scarf wrapped up to the nose, but the eyes were visible. They were dark, intense, and narrowed against the wind. "Back up!" The voice was muffled but commanding, a deep baritone that cut through the storm. Isabella scrambled across the center console to the passenger side, her limbs stiff and clumsy. The man outside reared back and kicked the driver's side door. Once, twice, the ice shattered, the metal groaned, and the door popped open with a screech. The wind rushed in, instantly freezing the tears on Isabella's cheeks. The man leaned in. He was huge. His shoulders filled the frame of the door. He smelled of wood smoke, wet wool, and horse. "You hurt?" he asked. He didn't wait for an answer. He reached in his leather gloves, gripping her arm. "Can you walk?" I can't feel my legs," Isabella stuttered, her teeth chattering so hard it hurt her jaw. "All right, hold on to me." He didn't drag her. He scooped her up, one arm under her knees, the other around her back. He lifted her out of the car, as if she weighed nothing more than a bale of hay. Outside, the wind hit her with the force of a physical blow. It took her breath away. But the man was a shield. He held her close to his chest, his shearling-lined coat rough against her cheek. "Easy, Midnight. Easy," he murmured. Through the squint of her eyes, Isabella saw the beast, a massive black horse, standing stoic in the gale, its mane whipped by the wind. The man hoisted Isabella up, swinging himself into the saddle behind her in one fluid motion. He wrapped his heavy coat around her, enclosing her in his warmth. "Tuck your head down," he ordered, his mouth close to her ear. "Don't look up until we stop." The horse turned, trudging through snow that was knee-deep. The ride was a blur of sensation, the rhythmic rocking of the horse, the heat of the man's chest against her back, the sound of the wind screaming in the trees. Isabella drifted in and out of consciousness. She knew she should be terrified. She was on a horse, with a stranger, in the middle of nowhere, but her body only registered one thing. He was warm, and he was strong. She didn't know how long they rode. It could have been 10 minutes or 2 hours. Time didn't exist in the whiteout. Eventually, the wind died down slightly. The horse's hooves struck wood a hollow, echoing sound. "We're here," the man said. He dismounted first, then reached up and pulled her down. Her legs collapsed the moment they touched the ground. He caught her effortlessly, swinging her back into his arms. He kicked open a heavy wooden door. The change was instant. The roar of the wind was cut off, replaced by the crackle of a fire. The smell of pine and coffee hit her. He carried her across a rug and deposited her on a soft, worn leather sofa. He turned immediately to the fireplace, throwing a fresh log onto the embers, poking it until flames licked up the chimney. Isabella shivered violently. She looked around. It was a cabin, not a resort. Cabin, a real one. Log walls, exposed beams, shelves lined with books and tools. No TV, no sleek furniture. The man turned back to her. He pulled off his hat, revealing messy dark hair and a face that was strikingly handsome, though weathered by the sun and wind. He had a strong jaw, covered in stubble, and eyes that were the color of slate. "Boots off," he said. It wasn't a request. He knelt before her, taking her foot in his hand. He worked the zipper of her fashion boot, pulling it off. He frowned at her thin socks. "City folk," he muttered, shaking his head. "You've got a death wish. Driving up the pass in a coupe. The GPS ... double quotes. GPs don't know the mountain," he said, rubbing her frozen foot briskly between his rough hands to get the blood flowing. The friction burned, but it felt good. "I'm Colton." "Isabella?" she whispered. "Well, Isabella," Colton said, looking up at her, his eyes serious. You're stuck. Pass is closed. Phone lines are down. You're my guest until this storm breaks. The storm didn't break for 3 days. For the first 24 hours, Isabella mostly slept. Her body was recovering from the shock of the hypothermia. Every time she woke up, there was a bowl of stew on the small table next to the couch, or a cup of hot tea. Colton moved around the cabin like a ghost, quiet and efficient. By the second day, the cabin fever set in. Isabella sat up, wrapping the heavy quilt around her shoulders. She watched Colton. He was sitting at the kitchen table, repairing a leather bridle. His hands were large, scarred, and incredibly precise. He moved the needle with a grace that contradicted his size. "Is there Wi-Fi?" Isabella asked, breaking the silence. Colton didn't look up. "No. Is there a landline?" "Lines are down." "Tolida," Isabella huffed. "I need to call Chicago. I have a team waiting on me. If I don't send the approval for the ad by, we lose the slot." Colton set the bridle down. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You almost froze to death yesterday. You think an ad buy matters?" "It matters to my career," she snapped, her city defenses rising. "I worked 5 years for this position, and it took nature 5 minutes to nearly wipe you out." Colton countered calmly. He stood up and walked to the stove, pouring coffee into 2 tin mugs. He brought one over to her. "Drink. It's black. I don't have sugar." Isabella took the mug. "Thank you," she muttered, begrudgingly. She watched him. He was an enigma. He clearly lived alone. The cabin was clean but sparse. There were no photos of family, just books, classics, history, geology on tools. "What do you do out here?" she asked. "Just sit." Colton laughed, a low rumble in his chest. "I run 400 head of cattle. Pre-med amend fences, I break horses. I survive. Don't you get lonely?" He looked at the window, where the snow was still falling. "Noise doesn't fill the empty spots. Isabella, silence does." That afternoon, he went outside to feed the horses. Isabella watched him from the window. The snow was waist-deep. He trudged through it, carrying bales of hay on his shoulders. He patted the neck of the black horse, talking to Italiano. She saw a softness in him then, a gentleness that he hid behind his gruff exterior. When he came back in, stomping the snow off his boots, the cabin felt smaller. "More intimate? Do you know how to cook?" he asked, rubbing his hands together near the fire. "I order out, mostly," she admitted. "Or meal kits." He shook his head, a small smirk playing on his lips. "Come? Ere?" He taught her how to make biscuits in a Castilian skillet. He stood behind her, guiding her hands, as she kneaded the dough. She could feel the heat radiating from him. His chest brushed against her back. Her breath hitched. "Don't overwork the dough," he murmured, his voice rough. "You have to be gentle, like this." His hands covered hers. His skin was rough, calloused, but warm. For a moment, neither of them moved. The crackle of the fire seemed to amplify. Isabella turned her head slightly. His face was inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his slate-gray eyes. The tension was thick, electric, a magnetic pole that terrified her more than the storm. Colton cleared his throat and stepped back abruptly. "Oven's hot," he said, turning away. That night, they sat by the fire. The storm had finally stopped howling, leaving a heavy, muffled silence. "Why are you here, Isabella?" Colton asked. "Really? I told you. For work." "No. People who are happy don't drive into blizzards to get away from their lives." Isabella looked into the flames. Tears pricked her eyes. "I'm tired," she whispered. "I'm always tired. I have everything I'm supposed to want. The money, the title, the apartment. But I wake up every morning, and I feel... Colton nodded slowly. "The city takes. The mountain gives. But you have to be willing to listen." He reached out and covered her hand with his. This time, he didn't pull away. They sat there for hours, holding hands, watching the fire die down. On the morning of the fourth day, the sun broke through. It was blinding. The light reflected off the pristine white blanket that covered the valley. It was the most beautiful thing Isabella had ever seen. But with the sun came the sound of an engine. A snowplow. Colton stood at the window. County road crew. They're clearing the pass. Isabella felt a weight drop in her stomach. "I can take you down to town in the truck," Colton said. "Get you to a phone. Rental agency can pick you up." "Right," she said. "Of course." The drive down the mountain was silent. The magic of the cabin felt like a dream that was fading with every mile. The cell service bars on her phone popped back up. Ding, ding, ding. 30 emails, 12 missed calls. The noise of her life came rushing back. Colton pulled his battered truck up to the general store in the small town at the base of the mountain. A shiny replacement rental car was already waiting, dropped off by the agency. Isabella got out. She stood by the truck door, clutching her purse. She wore her city clothes again, but they felt wrong. Too tight. Too thin. "Colton," she started. He tipped his hat. He didn't look at her. He looked at the horizon. "You take care of yourself, Isabella. Drive slow." "That's it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You saved my life." He looked at her then. The intensity in his eyes burned her. "You belong out there, in the skyscrapers. You got a merger to finish?" "I go on," he said softly. "Go be a vice president." He put the truck in gear and drove away. He didn't look back. Isabella watched the truck disappear around the bend. She felt a physical pain in her chest, a tearing sensation. She looked at her phone. Her assistant was calling. She answered. "I'm coming back," she said. Her voice sounded like a stranger's. Chicago was gray, not the clean, bright white of Montana. It was a slushy, dirty gray. The wind didn't howl. It whipped around corners carrying trash and exhaust fumes. Isabella sat in her corner office. The view was magnificent steel and glass stretching for miles. It was exactly what she had worked for. She had closed the merger. Everyone applauded. There was champagne. Her boss hinted at a partner track. She felt absolutely nothing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the firelight reflecting in Colton's eyes. She felt the roughness of his hands. She smelled the pine and the wood smoke. She went to expensive dinners. The food tasted like cardboard compared to the stew from a tin can. She went to parties. The conversation was shallow, buzzing with ego and networking. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. It was a Tuesday. She was in a strategy meeting. Someone was talking about optimizing user engagement through aggressive retargeting. Isabella looked down at her hands. Her manicured nails were perfect again, but she remembered the flour on them. She remembered the feeling of making something real. She stood up. "Isabella," her boss asked, "do you have input?" "I quit," she said. The room went silent. "Excuse me." "I quit," she said louder. "I can't do this. I don't want to optimize anything. I want to live." She walked out of the conference room. She walked out of the building. She didn't even pack her desk. The drive up the mountain was different this time. The snow had melted significantly, revealing patches of brown earth and green pine. The sky was a piercing blue. Isabella drove a heavy-duty truck she had bought in Bozeman. She had flannel on. She had boots that were meant for mud. She didn't use the GPS. She remembered the way, every curve, every tree. She pulled up the long dirt driveway. The cabin looked exactly the same. Smoke curled from the chimney. She parked and got out. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She found him in the barn. He was brushing midnight. He froze when he heard her footsteps. He didn't turn around immediately. He rested his hand on the horse's flank, his head lowered. "You lost again?" he asked. His voice was thick. "No," Isabella said, stepping into the barn. The smell of hay and horse surrounded her. It smelled like home. "I'm not lost. I think, Dot, I think I finally found where I'm supposed to be. Colton turned slowly. He looked tired. There were circles under his eyes. He looked at her boots. He looked at the flannel. He looked at her face, which wasn't wearing makeup. "You quit your job?" he asked. "I quit my life," she corrected. "I traded it in. It's a hard life out here, Isabella," he warned, taking a step toward her. "No takeout, no parties, just work. And cold. And silence." "I love the silence," she said, closing the distance between them. "As long as you're in it." Colton let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a month. He crossed the remaining space in 2 long strides. He grabbed her, pulling her against his chest. It was the same feeling as the rescued the shield. The strength, but this time it was filled with desperation. Quiset erit was a searing, claiming kiss. It tasted of longing and promise. Isabella wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her hands in his hair. "I thought I'd never see you again," he whispered against her lips. "You're stuck with me now, Cowboy," she smiled, tears running down her face. "I'm not going anywhere." Colton smiled, a genuine, wide smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Well then," he said, "I guess I better teach you how to chop wood." Outside, the sun dipped below the mountain peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. The wind whispered through the pines. But it wasn't a threat anymore. It was a welcome.